So we talked about if you're... Okay, let's revisit yesterday's reel. So we talked about if you're somebody who tends to hold tension in the back of your hip. If you are tighter back here, you might have some tightness in the front of your hip, but you're more likely to benefit from increasing the strength, from strengthening your hip flexors in the front of your hip, because that will allow you to have more balance in the hip and it'll let you turn off the tension or the clenching that you have in the back of your hip. But what if you're the person who stands with your upper body forward of your lower body? In that case, you're more likely to be tight in the front of your hip and need to stretch this out. So you're more likely to be tight here and tight in your lower back. And so in this case, you want to start here. So don't you let the sunlight go out without you. Don't you realize how lucky we are? Open up your heart, baby, let it all go tonight. Okay, so after you stretch out the muscles in your lower back in that deep squat, then you're going to need to come back and find a way to stretch out the front of your hip. And most of the time, what I see as a hip flexor stretch is that one that you've probably also seen where you kneel on one knee and then you push your hips forward like this. The problem is, if you're somebody who tends to stand with your upper body forward of your lower body, it means that you're really good at creating motion here, and you're not so good at creating motion in the front of your hip. So when you do this half kneeling stretch, you just repeat what I just described. You do this, you get motion here, the only thing you're stretching is maybe your abs, and you're not getting length in the front of your hip. And so this is why I described in yesterday's reel, instead of getting on one knee and trying to stretch your hip flexors, lay on the floor. So yesterday we used laying on the floor, taking one knee up to your chest and making the other leg straight as a test to see whether or not you have good hip flexor mobility. And if you find that you don't have good hip flexor mobility, stay laying on the floor. That is my favorite position for stretching your hip flexors if you are truly tight, because you don't have to control your upper body anymore. You don't have to figure out whether you're in the right position, because gravity will pull you into the right position. Gravity will pull you towards the floor, and you can concentrate on taking one knee up to your chest and tightening your glutes on the other side. And when you tighten your glutes in the back of your hip, you lengthen your hip flexors in the front of your hip. And so in this case, to switch the balance, you need less from the front and more from the back, because you have too much in the front. But once you get good at stretching out your hip flexors lying on the floor, here's a previous reel that I did that gives you a whole progression of how to stretch your hip flexors in even more and in even more functional positions, but with starting on the floor by learning how to get control there. And hopefully this discussion yesterday and today helps you see why the same solutions don't work for everyone, and different people need different answers depending on how they use their bodies.